I became a follower of Jesus in my mid-20s, which is an incredible story. I'm going to do a video about that maybe as well. When I became a Christian, the last thing that I wanted to do was like suspend my rational, intelligent mind, which was something that I thought I might have to do if I was going to become a follower of Jesus. And so I went on this journey trying to work out whether becoming a Christian was actually a reasonable and rational thing to do. And one of the big questions I was asking was, could I trust it? Could I trust what was written in the New Testament? Are these documents, are they reliable? Could I trust Jesus? I wanted to know things like, who wrote the New Testament? Why did they write it? When? Where? Who were they writing to? I also wanted to know things like, has it been changed or altered in some way? I think basically at the heart of what I was trying to figure out was all of the stuff that's been written in the New Testament about Jesus made up? Is it just a fairy story? For me, it was really important that I figure out the answer to these questions, and so I read books and I studied everything I could find and anything that I could get my hands on, really. I read and reread the New Testament. I wanted to kind of get to know the people that I met in the pages, to inhabit their world as far as like it's possible to do that. What I've come to learn are these things. Firstly, that the people who wrote the New Testament were highly educated, highly intelligent people who were deeply moved about the things that they witnessed, specifically the life, the death, the resurrection of Jesus. The second thing is this, that the majority of the documents were written relatively soon after these events that happened. The earliest letters that we find in the New Testament are written 10, 12 years after the events of that first Easter. Third thing I learned was that what was written hasn't been changed or altered in any way. In fact, source criticism of the text proves that 99.9% of what was written is what you can read in your Bibles today. The fourth thing that I've learned is that what was written is true. Why do I believe this? I believe this fundamentally because we also know that 10 of the 11 remaining disciples of Jesus were all executed for what they went around telling people about the things that they'd seen Jesus do, about his death and his resurrection, the thing that they'd witnessed for themselves. 10 of the 11 disciples were executed because they went around telling this story. And the amazing thing is, none of them ever changed their story. None of them, under intense questioning, turned around and said, well, hang on just a minute before you chop my head off. There might have been one or two things that I exaggerated, that I'd been embellishing. That didn't happen. All of them went round proclaiming the same story, that these things that they'd witnessed, that they'd seen, that Jesus was a great prophet, a great teacher, that he was executed on a Roman cross, that he, on the third day after he'd been executed, he rose from the dead. These are the same things that they kept on telling people over and over again. And more than that, they believed that claims that Jesus made about himself, that he was actually God, come in person, were also true. Most of the remaining disciples died horrible deaths, but none of them changed their story. It was this fact that convinced an American man called Chuck Colson that the good news about Jesus was really actually true. Chuck served as special counsel to President Nixon in 1969-1970. He was there as the events of Watergate, that scandal, were unraveling. Watergate led to the downfall of Nixon's presidency and saw several members of his cabinet end up in prison, including Chuck Colson. It's while he was in prison that Chuck became a follower of Jesus. In explaining why, he said this. He said, I know the resurrection is a fact, and Watergate proved it to me. How? because 12 men testified they had seen Jesus raised from the dead, and then they proclaimed that truth for 40 years, never once denying it. Every one of them was beaten, tortured, stoned, or put in prison. They would not have endured that if it weren't true. Chuck goes on to say, Watergate embroiled 12 of the most powerful men in the world, and they couldn't keep a lie for 3 weeks. Like Chuck, if you're telling me 12 apostles could keep a lie for 40 years, absolutely impossible. It's true. Jesus did rise from the dead. Which leads me to one final thing that I've learned. The truth is that because Jesus is risen from the dead, that news is powerful. Throughout history, countless men and women have had their own encounter with the risen Jesus, and they have had their lives absolutely transformed as a result. Jesus isn't just risen from the dead, but he's actively at work right now, bringing us back into this loving relationship with God that we were created to share. He's done it throughout history. He's done it for countless people around the world. He's done it for me, and he's longing to do it for you as well. Truth is that nobody is too far, too lost, too broken, that Jesus isn't longing to find them and to bring them home. And that will always include you too.